Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and we're here today with special guest, Ann Saffi Biasetti, who's here to share with us her book, Befriending Your Body, a self-compassionate approach to freeing yourself from disordered eating. So are you looking for a step-by-step, holistic approach to eating disorder recovery? Well, today's guest is here to share with us just that. So Dr. Ann Saffi Biasetti is a practicing psychotherapist for over 34 years. She holds a PhD in psychology with a transpersonal concentration and is licensed as a clinical social worker. She specializes in somatic psychotherapy and is an eating disorder specialist. She's a certified mindfulness teacher, mindful self-compassion teacher, and a certified yoga therapist. She is an author, speaker, and teacher of self-compassion and somatic interventions in eating disorder recovery, as well as retreat leader, teaching embodied, women's embodiment, and body image. She trains professionals through PESI and in her Befriending Your Body certification program for eating disorder recovery and in restorative yoga through her school and embodied life. So welcome to the show, Ann Saffi Biasetti.
Thank you, Marianne. It's a pleasure to be here.
My goodness, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. What inspired you to write this?
So Befriending Your Body was born from actually my doctoral research. I was a clinician for 20 years and then decided in my 40s to go back to school for my PhD in psychology. And when I was doing this research study, which was research on the role that self-compassion played in guiding women, helping women not just to achieve recovery in their body and with food and within themselves, but also really what I was most interested in is learning about how it helped them to sustain that over time, because that was really what I was running into as a clinician and what we run into in the world of recovery from any type of eating disorder, disordered eating, body image issues, is that there's constant return to those distressing behaviors and thoughts. And these were women that came to my research study specifically because they had met the criteria for meeting what we call out in the world behavioral recovery, meaning they weren't doing self-harming behavior anymore in any way to their body. And they really related to the role of self-compassion as having a major, major impact on that and the sustainment, being able to go forward and continue that. And so this book was born from really the qualitative research, the interviews that I did with these women, the in-depth interviews that I found so enriching that by the end of this study, rather than putting it into a journal article and multiple journal articles that really wouldn't get out there to the public, right? They would be.
Well, I'm so grateful that you put all that together and brought this book forth because, how often do we think of, okay, we're going to heal the body, but that self-compassion part, most people don't consider that.
That's right. That's right. And especially in this population, and that's actually what inspired me to research self-compassion within this population to begin with, because of the fact that so many people struggle with being compassionate when it has anything to do with their body or food. As a matter of fact, it's a population that tends to have what we call in the self-compassion world, we call when it's difficult to take in self-compassion, there's a name for it called backdraft. And it's as if we, oh my goodness, say, no way, I can't have that. That if I end up being compassionate, especially around this body, especially my relationship with food, I will lose control. I will, keep doing the same thing. I will give myself permission to do anything. It's all these misgivings about self-compassion. And so this particular population tends to stay.
So how does self-compassion help with the healing?
Yeah, there's many stages to it, but it's funny when I started the research, I'm working really hard at it. To I don't have to work hard at it, and then I heard people say, "Well, there was no self-compassion in the beginning," and then people saying, "Well, self-compassion had everything to do with it." So it was kind of all across the board, and part of what you do in qualitative research is really make sense of all of those themes, all of those words, and the process. And it really begins with understanding. And the process really starts and started for all my participants with beginning to have a new understanding about what was happening inside their body rather than external. So they knew what was happening in behavior and what was going on with that, but they didn't understand actually what was happening within their body, such as what is actually happening within my physiology, my system, my nervous system, my organs. They needed to have a depth of understanding that they weren't getting on the outside. People were so focused on their appearance and so focused on their behavior that no one ever stopped to start to really listen to what their internal experience was and respecting that. So that's really where it needed to start, was understanding of what was happening within, and then a greater component of this, a really.
So in your book, you talk about disordered eating as an attempt to feed the soul. What
Yeah.
is that all about? I'd love for you to dive into that.
Yeah, sure. So self-compassion in and of itself is what we call a psycho-spiritual construct, meaning that the more people practice it, it's an interesting thing. One of the misgivings about self-compassion is that the more they practice it, that they will become self-centered. But it's actually quite the opposite. So the more people practice self-compassion, the more compassionate they become, not only to themselves, but to others. So self-compassion creates a connection and a sense of connection both within ourselves and outward. And when we talk about that component, you can use the word soul for many different things: soul, spirit, reconnection with what was meaningful to them, reconnection with their values, reconnection with something greater than just what their body looked like. So, image beyond image. So self-compassion, being that psycho-spiritual construct, moved people, the more they aligned with it and allowed it to be there, moved them into really coming home to what felt very true to them, like their truest self. As a yoga therapist, I teach my classes, and we often speak of concepts like that, like coming home, coming back to yourself. And the interesting thing throughout the research is that when women talked about reconnecting with the soul within this body, whatever that meant to them, they piece that was explored over.
In your book, you discuss how, I guess, the common experience that many talk about is feeling broken. Can you share
Yes.
about that with us?
Yes, broken was, was a word that every single participant used to describe the beginning stage of their recovery process when there was no self-compassion to be found. So they described it as a time where they felt completely disconnected from their mind and body. So as if mind and body were separate entities. Many of them, because a lot of the interviews were done in person as well, so many of them would even give the visual image of saying, I feel cut off from, the neck up, head up, and don't even know anything about this body. So broken comprised both that separation between mind and body, which we call disembodiment. It also comprised so much grief, because when someone is so preoccupied um, within their mind that way, and preoccupied with behavior that is leaving them feeling so shamed and disconnected from the world, from others, they actually lose life. They lose.
It's kind of like they have a segment of their life that just isn't there.
That's right. That's right. And that's really that reflection back was quite profound for all of them to recognize it. And the beautiful transformative component of that of broken was that now once they embraced compassion and once they embrace the ability to tolerate moments of grief again and move forward, they had such gratitude for their lives in the present moment. So there is a transformative quality. I really like to point that out to everyone that it may be the place that people are feeling like they're starting, but it does not at all mean that that's where they will end up. As a matter of fact, it's quite the opposite because that transformative place of birth in this body, in this life now.
So it's possible, regardless what the great suffering is, because, let's face it, I mean, life it has valleys and peaks. And it seems like there's always suffering in one form or another that will be.
Yeah, that's really, many people, even though the book was and the research was centered on self-compassion, healing, folks that were struggling within a relationship with their body, food, and self. Many people had reached out to me after the book was released saying that they were using it really through all forms of transition in life, all different types of recovery, any kind of healing and growth. And that is so the process that is listed in the book of sort of how to return and transform the suffering was really a process that people were able to apply to so many different forms of transition and growth and healing that was needed. So yes, in transpersonal psychology, which is my field of study, we look at suffering and the difficulties and the challenges in life. We take another view of them, right? So we don't say they're pleasant by any means, right? Self-compassion actually meets. That's why self-compassion is there. It shows up in the most difficult times is when we use it, and it doesn't transform it in the way where we say, oh, I'm going to move to gratitude, or everything's great, or I'm not going to think about that. No, it's actually quite the opposite. It moves in to hold the suffering in a different way and to soothe it so that we can be with it. We can feel it. We can.
You have so many wonderful practices within your book. Is there one that you could share with us now so readers and our listeners can cultivate?
Yeah, so there's multiple, as you say, in there, but the one that I really like people to become aware of from the start. There's a few phrases that I have throughout the book, but particularly that I use in my current program that I have that was created out of the book. Just the simple phrase when you're in a tough moment of saying, out of fairness, this is hard. This moment is hard. So just that acknowledgement of a tough moment, and if we couple that with what we call a compassionate touch, and that could be anything from holding your hands together. It could be something like taking a hand to your heart. You could be giving yourself a little hug. One of the particular practices that I have in the book that people really love is what I call the heavy head. And it's a practice where you just allow yourself to rest your arms on your desk, your chair, whatever it may be, and just take both hands or one hand and let your hands embrace your cheeks, the side of your head, the top of your head, whatever it may be. And the practice takes us through the felt sense of what it's like to let the mind that's filled with worry, fear, trepidation, whatever else it may be, to let that just rest and be held for a while. And that practice ends up being a real favorite of folks because you'd be surprised how just this little component of taking a soft, warm touch to an area that tends to be filled with so much heaviness, how that just can lighten a moment. And in that practice, I encourage people, I have words that I encourage them to use, like, this is a lot to carry around. I wish for this to be released. Can I just allow in the comfort, the soothing to this moment and allow that to be enough right now? So that's a little practice that I really encourage people say that once they learn it, that they kind of take that throughout the day. I mean, who of us does not have worry, right? Does not have fear, does not have the anxiety of what's next. So it's a combining it with touch and those kinds of compassionate words really allows us to just hold the moment differently.
Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Ann Saffi Biasetti in regards to her book, Befriending Your Body, a self-compassionate approach to freeing yourself from disordered eating. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
Are you an author, speaker, or expert who is looking for more publicity? Visit radioguestlist.com and sign up for free interview requests from shows looking for guests. Radio Guest List is the #1 free booking resource for radio, podcasts, and TV talk shows who are looking for experts like you right now. Visit radioguestlist.com and sign up today to get the visibility you deserve.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special. When you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with special guest, Ann Saffi Biasetti, who's here sharing with us her book, Befriending Your Body, a self-compassionate approach to freeing yourself from disordered eating. So what would you say to people who want to approach their body with some self-compassion, but they're in this place where they just don't feel that they have any to give, not even to themselves?
Yeah, it's a great question because many people feel that way. As a matter of fact, self-compassion often, when we first try to bring it in, can often bring up sadness in the way of saying, something, I don't think I ever received this. I don't think I received this. And how about if I don't want to give this to myself? I would like to get this from someone, right? I would like someone to give this to me. I mean, this is human nature, is that we would like this to come in from someone else. And so it's not the typical practice to try and do this for oneself. And with that, what I say and what we say out in the world of self-compassion research, my primary teachers, Chris Germer and Kristen Neff, and they created the mindful self-compassion program, and we all say the same words, which is we want to start really small. So self-compassion practice doesn't mean that we have to immediately start with those kinds of words that I was just sharing. We can start with little acts of comfort. So, what I ask people to do is pay attention to what they're already actually doing, but just to reframe it and rename it now in a different way. So, I like to give the example, for instance, and I think many people do this kind of ritual, right? In the morning, they may make their cup of coffee or cup of tea. And rather than going through the motions of that being just a ritual, how about we just pause for a moment and consider that it's not just a ritual, it's actually something about it that feels really good. Um, and yes, maybe the smell, the taste, but how about the warmth, the comfort, the soothing of just that little act that you do every day and may not even recognize it? How about when you pick out, certain materials that you like to wear because they're soft or comforting, or you cuddle up in a blanket that feels really good to you? Those are all actual acts of self compassion that we just don't turn our mind toward because they're so habitual. And we don't consider that, oh, wait a minute, these are not just things that I like, these are things that actually feel soothing and comforting. And so that's where I like people to begin because they're already doing things that feel soothing and comforting. And then the actual practice of self compassion just begins to heighten that.
So, I know in your book you share about spirituality. So, how does this play a role in healing?
Spirituality is really in the research done on spirituality, it is another form of what creates resilience within. So, resilience to being able to um, have a new way to hold difficult emotional experience, a new way to hold difficult cognitive thought experience, and a new way to hold life suffering, right? So spirituality is another resource. And again, we can broaden what does that mean to people. So when I invite people in the later chapters, I invite people into considering getting in touch with either again or in a new way, getting in touch with some form of spirituality. And to broaden it, what I mean by that is another example I like to give with it is anything that moves your heart, anything that gives that little bit of jump to your heart is a spiritual practice. So that could be being with animals, that could be being in nature, that could be being near the water if that's what calls you. That could mean a yoga practice. That could mean reinstating or reconnecting with formal organized religion that you once were connected with. I had many women say, I turned away from my church or I turned away from my place of worship and I really feel like I need to get back there. So we have to broaden it to really mean whatever starts to move you into a place of connection and move your heart. So spirituality really can mean any of those components. And to know that when we do that, when we engage in anything that moves our heart that way, we are creating more resiliency. It's another protective factor, another holding.
In your book, you share about reframing through the body, and I was very intrigued by that. And I'd love to hear you just share a little bit more about that with us.
Sure. Yeah, it's a really important practice that I have there in chapter 2. And it's one of the things that happens with our bodies is that we have been taught, and this is no fault of ours at all, but really it's a worldview that we have to think about our bodies rather than sense them. And that's where the disconnection comes from. So I like everyone to understand that, again, we were not born with this disembodied view. We were born fully connected, fully embodied beings. And as we grow and the cognitive mind, right, our higher thought process, thinking mind comes in and our brain develops, and the outside world supports thinking over feeling and sensing within these bodies, then we move to a place of what I call prejudging the body. So we don't give our bodies a fair chance to report to us on a sensory level what's really happening inside. So an example of this would be, let's say I have pain in my back, like I've had lower back pain spasms before, like many people middle age or an older do. And prejudging it would be me waking up in the morning and saying, oh, I don't I don't think I'm going to go ahead and do that today because of my back. When I haven't even checked into noticing if that sensation is present today, right in this moment. So what happens is we end up prejudging a lot about our body, such as, oh, I'm going to go on that 5-mile run, when really our body is super exhausted and needs to rest in that moment. Or the opposite, I'm going to sleep right now because that's what I need, instead of checking in and actually perhaps our body needing a little bit more energizing movement, or at least some energizing breath, let's say, or something like that. So this fair evaluation of the body is a practice that actually takes us through starting to what I call disentangle thoughts from sensations, so that we don't prejudge the body anymore. We give it a fair chance to start to communicate with us, to start to teach us about what it really needs and wants in that moment. Like any other relationship, right? We start to begin to listen to it differently. And many people have reported, especially people with chronic pain, have reported that that is a central practice for them, because they would prejudge their body in ways that they were making their life very small. And I had one woman say to me, after practicing this over and over, I recognized that every day was different. And sometimes the pain was in my arms, but not in my legs. Sometimes it was in my back, but not in the front of my body. So she was able to make adjustments accordingly rather than give up on everything. So it's a really, really important practice of how do we start to pull apart. It's like glue. The thoughts are like glue in our body, and we have to start to sort of melt that away, pull it apart, so we could give our body a fair chance to tell us what's happening.
Where do you think most people get stuck as they go through this process?
I think the biggest piece that people get stuck with, and this is another really central one that's kind of invites people in the middle of the book, because it's a more challenging thought process. We are so used to, when it comes especially to self-compassion, we don't have a problem being kind to ourselves when we think we're doing something right and good, right? We are like, oh, okay, yes, I did a good thing. We don't have much of a problem rewarding ourselves on that level. And that's a very cultural and culturated piece, right? That we strive and move towards success, and we really celebrate accomplishments and success in big ways. So we have that very embedded embedded. Again, it's not an individual issue. It's a common humanity that we have embedded. The hard part is, how do we be kind to ourselves when we have done something that we feel is not kind to ourselves? So when it comes to this particular piece, and the struggle along the way, which is behavior takes a long time to change. So self-compassion says, even if you are having a really challenging day, you were self-critical toward your body, you had a really challenging day with food, how can you still be kind to yourself, even if you feel there was something that was unkind that was done? So that's what we call a binary thought, which is, oh, I can only be kind to myself when I've done something good. And then I have to punish and criticize myself if I feel like I've done something bad, because that's the only way I'll get out of it. And self-compassion actually comes in the middle and says, no, I'm going to show up here even when you're doing things that are not kind. And that is actually what's going to soften you toward the kind things. So I hope that makes sense, because it's a really tough one for people to get. And, a little practice that I have around it has to do with food, and it's in the book. And I ask people if they felt that today was a day that they really supported their body and, what they really wanted to do with food, place a hand on your heart and, support yourself and offer yourself kindness for, how the day has gone for you. And then I say to them, if today was a day you didn't feel like you supported yourself well that way, still place a hand on your heart and acknowledge how hard this day has been, and place a hand there and say, this was a moment, and may I have the chance to begin again. So it's a powerful practice, because most people sit there and say, like, oh, I only get to place a hand on my heart in this one direction, not the other. So they're often quite surprised when I say, still place a hand there and give yourself kindness.
I think that's such an empowering exercise to go through. And I love how people can begin again, because
Yes.
I would think that people get to a point where they're like, okay, well, I have really nosedived today. I haven't eaten well. I'm kind of a little out of control with that, and get on themselves, as opposed to thinking that they could just start from where they are.
That's right. And that is actually the crux of what self-compassion does throughout this rebuilding, befriending process. In this whole process, that is the crux of what it does, Marianne, is exactly that. It allows people to begin again. And every participant who had really sustained very strong long-term self-kindness toward their body and food, that was what they reported the most, that self-compassion did for them. They said, I didn't get stuck anymore. Because as you just mentioned, that's the hardest thing, right? When we have our human experiences of having a bad day, returning to old patterns, that is the human experience with anything in this life, right? So the problem is, when we criticize ourselves, we actually flood our entire nervous system as well. We reinforce the punishing in our brain. Those loops connect and stay reinforced. And that's where then behavior and old patterns are going to reinstate and come back and kind of hold us stuck again. Where when self-compassion comes in, it's kind of like a gentle shock to the whole system, right? Because the system is so used to that punishment coming in and that self-criticism, that when self-compassion comes in, like I said, when I do that practice, everyone looks at me like, wow, oh my gosh, I'm allowed to do that. So it's a new occurrence, to feel that. It's a new experience, I should say, to feel that in the whole system. And it really ends up over time when we do that, the unstuckness actually comes from a real important neurobiological change, which is that it soothes our nervous system and begins to allow for a new cognitive reframe and experience to come in, so that when that hard day happens again, or that same behavior happens again, over time, people are like, something? I'm human. This is a hard day. Of course, this was going to happen. And now I can start again. I can stand back up.
If someone has or develops a mindfulness practice, does that tend to help with this new way of life?
Yeah, absolutely. Mindfulness and self-compassion. There's a beautiful teaching, actually, in the spiritual teachings about mindfulness and compassion. They call it the two wings of the bird, meaning that one without the other, the bird can't fly. So if we have mindfulness, which is the present moment awareness, being very purposeful and intentional about our focus and where we place our attention, if we have that practice, that's fantastic. However, what I tell everyone is the challenge happens when we start to notice things we don't want to notice. And if we don't have self-compassion on the other end to say exactly what we were just saying, which is, hey, you just noticed a really hard truth. You just noticed something that was really, really tough for you to admit to and to notice. How can we be kind here to learn more about this? If we don't have self-compassion to come in and say that, I call self-compassion the gentle teacher. So we become aware of something, but then don't have the other wing of the bird, that self-compassion, to mediate it. Well, then, unfortunately, mindfulness falls flat, and it will be replaced by something very unmindful, which is criticism and that whole cycle again. So they do go together, and when we can bring them together, those two wings of the bird, then we can fly, right? When we can bring those two teachings together and really allow our awareness to grow and to be honest with ourselves, and at the same time compassionate toward what we're noticing, well, then we have a very empowering experience inside.
Do you have meditation practices that go with this work as well?
Yes, in the book, there are several meditations as well. A very primary and powerful one that's in the book, and I have many of the meditation practices and many of the practices that are in the book. I do have them recorded on my website, and those are, people can download those for free to practice with. But a very powerful one is the practice of forgiveness. And that's a meditation that I ask people to just listen to. They don't even have to formally sit down and practice with it. They can just kind of play it in the background. And it's one that it really starts to shift people's perspective on what they've been going through. And it really talks about coming, exactly like I said, that awareness that, hey, there have been things that maybe I've done here to this body that I am finally becoming aware of and I don't like. And the powerful, powerful practice of understanding that we never meant to do this. All of these behaviors come into our lives not from our doing. It's not a choice-based process. It's so much of it, majority of it is what we're really encouraged to do out in the world, which is not be kind to our body, to control our body in all different ways, shapes and sizes, right? And activity level, everything. So we come to understand that, wait a minute, what am I really forgiving? Am I forgiving myself for anything here? Or am I forgiving based on now this new understanding that I was only trying to help myself in some way. I wasn't trying to purposely do harm. And so this practice of forgiveness and its relationship to self-compassion is really intertwined. And the two, again, are crucial partners together in really coming to a new understanding. So, if there's any of the meditations in the book, I believe many of them are helpful, but this practice of forgiveness has been such a central one. It's actually turned into a second independent qualitative research study for myself as well last year. I wanted to really understand more of the role of forgiveness on embodiment. And it really came out of this practice because this practice was, I heard from hundreds of people throughout the years how powerful this practice was for them.
Well, I can't wait to hear how that research goes. So, I think it'll be very enlightening, and it kind of has me thinking. I mean, I know you've worked with so many people. Do you have a story you can share with us of someone that's used this book and the principles to kind of shape and reshape their relationship with food and their body?
Yeah, well, I have many. So I'll see if I can kind of hone in on one or two there. Um, Probably the most beautiful thing for me to hear is when I have a client, and had a client recently discuss with me about how she has recognized that she only participated in leaving her body because she thought she had to, based on all the messages out in the world. And this is just so important because that's what I meant in that practice of forgiveness, that people come to realize, wait a second, I don't even think this was my own doing. I felt very manipulated by, diet culture and all the messages out there, that like if I wasn't complaining and hating on this body, I wasn't part of the tribe. So she really was able to grieve that and say, wow, I feel like I was duped, I really joined the masses. And now recognizing that, I never wanted to do that. I actually am entirely grateful that this body is kind of stuck with me here, right? And that now I am listening, and we're in this partnership now. So those are words when I hear someone say that. Now, this is someone who's done who read the book, who's done my program with me, who's really embedded herself in trying to build this relationship differently. And I want to emphasize that because it is hard work. It's hard work, it's brave work out in a world that tells us that we shouldn't be doing this, that you're not part of the tribe if you don't, hate on your body and criticize it and, manipulate it in all ways. And so stopping this cycle of manipulation like that and just really trying to come back to a place of coming home again to this body, like she was saying, really, number one is a loss. So she was grieving that. She was actually grieving a sense of belonging that she felt she once had, being part of that tribe. But now she said, my goodness, what I thought I was losing, the gain that I have had in feeling protected and protective over my body is something amazing now. And those are beautiful words, because when we come back to a sense of embodiment, we realize that our body, my goodness, internally, our bodies are working nonstop at homeostasis, trying to keep us safe, trying to keep us protected. Boy, they do so much work for us. And I have another statement in the program that this particular client and so many of the participants in my program come to embody, which is, can we for a moment just understand that our body never meant to cause us any harm. It never meant to trouble us. Never meant to disconnect us or make us feel like we don't belong. It never meant to do any of those things. So yeah, it's a beautiful journey to watch when someone gets there. And I have, many others that have that also, share those kinds of words. But it's beautiful to hear when clients come in and they have found it on their own that way.
What an empowering journey that is. And I really like the fact that you have not only the book Befriending Your Body, but also, other ways that people can really dive into this type of work.
Yes, yeah. I out of the book came the birth of the Befriending Your Body program, which is an 8-week program that journeys people through the somatic practice. So somatic self-compassion, what I call embodied self-compassion. And it's actually my form of therapy, my form of somatic therapy that I use with my clients. And the 8-week program takes people through that step by step, and they really learn a whole new set of skills week to week. And it's really so important that they're in community. And that's how the program was born, because after the book was released, so many people reached out to me saying, "Oh, my therapist is guiding me through the book, or my dietitian, or I'm gathering with friends." Many women were gathering together in more of a self-help book club sort of thing, and they were doing the practices together. So I very quickly understood that this had to be a community and had to be a common humanity experience together, and that's how the program was born. So people can engage with that, and I now train professionals in that. So that's a beautiful thing. I love to see the program being offered now around the world, and many opportunities for people to be able to join in and have this opportunity at growth and a new way of healing.
Well, Anne, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work and how to be involved?
Thank you. Yeah, so I have currently 2 websites. One is called anembodiedlife.com, and that shares with the listeners just more of my professional offerings. And then the befriendingyourbodyprogram.com. That website is everything about the program and the offering, and ways that they can connect. It's also the training for professionals is there, but on that website is also the whole page of free resources. So they can hop on that page, and there's lots and lots of downloadable meditations, practices, webinars, podcasts, yoga practices, all that kind of lovely stuff that they can hopefully engage in and with for free. So this wanted to make the work as accessible for folks as possible.
Well, Anne, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you, Marianne. I really appreciate you having me on.
Well, thank you, Anne. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your book, Befriending Your Body, a self-compassionate approach to freeing yourself from disordered eating. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.